So, I am sitting here in my apartment, and it is a beautiful day out. And because of that, I went out and found an old book at my parents' house that I knew I had, but I didn't know where it was exactly. But anyway, so I went over there and found it and started reading it and decided that this would be a pretty wonderful book to read some of and post on the channel. Because this is basically an ASMR channel. I don't know if I enjoy putting labels on it because, I do some, play video games, and I have some other ideas that I don't know if they would necessarily fit under the ASMR category. Sorry, I was adjusting the image here. But I think that this next thing that I plan on doing will fit really well in with the whole vibe I'm trying to go for here, which is just I guess I've never really gone and explained it, but I'll explain a little bit. I have a lot of trouble falling asleep and a lot of trouble relaxing. I'm a very very anxious person, very depressed person in general, and I really relish background noise, and specifically when I'm trying to get to sleep because I just have no way of turning my brain off otherwise. And even with the background noise, it's very difficult. So that was kind of the idea with this channel, was just to have an ability, an outlet to really engage a community and a style that has done a lot for me in my adult life. So that was kind of the idea, but I struggled a long time trying to figure out what exactly I wanted to do. I have certain passions. If you've watched any of the videos, I think you know one of them's video games. So I do enjoy video games, so that was a must. I was like, all right, I'm going to do something video game related. But the other passion I have is books and writing, and that's primarily what I do in my spare time is read and write. I have some ideas for in the future, maybe reading some of my original stories on the channel, and see how that goes. See what the interest in that would be. But I had struggled to think of like a book that I could read that would kind of fit this mold, and then I realized I was overthinking it, and I'm like, well, really any book read in a monotone sort of bedtime story fashion will do. I mean, you could read the dictionary or whatever, it doesn't really matter. So anyway, with that long rambling preamble that I just gave you, the book I have here today is Italian Folktales, and it is by a man who is, in my opinion, woefully underrated, and not many people know his work or his name these days. And I think that's a shame because I think he's one of the great artists of all time. And that is Mr. Italo Calvino, who this is a picture of him on the screen here. I didn't know what else to put on the screen, so because I don't really have a good camera, so I was like, well, I'm not gonna just sit here and like hold a camera over the book. That just seems, I don't know, it seems, maybe I'll do that at some point, but there's no pictures in the book or anything, so there's really nothing to see but the words. And of course I'm going to read the words to you, so what do you need to see them for? But maybe you just like to really follow along, a finger going across the page here. Maybe that's relaxing to you. I don't know. Everybody's different. But anyway, yeah, Italo Calvino is a great favorite of mine. Invisible Cities is one of the finest pieces of art ever created. I read it in high school, and I make a habit of rereading it pretty much annually. It inspired me. It made me want to become a writer. It made me creative, or made me start thinking creatively. Kind of, just set me down the path that I find myself on now in a lot of ways, at least when it comes to my passions and things like that. Not so much my like career stuff, but because my career doesn't have much to do with creativity at the moment. I hope I can change that at some point. But regardless, I have here his collection of Italian folk tales in the beautiful edition, the beautiful Mariner edition, with those sort of business card style feeling cover, where it's white, but it's not like completely smooth. And it's got these hand drawn, very minimalist covers. Of course, we have the Calvino written at the top. I guess this would be a good time to have a camera, so I don't have to sit here and describe everything to you. But we've got Calvino written up at the top in cursive, and then Italian Folktales written at the bottom in cursive as well. So I thought a fun video, and don't worry, I also plan on doing some Slay the Spire today, because I have been playing it on my off time and trying to get better at it so I can actually win on camera. I have won the game once, but it wasn't on camera. But I feel more confident in the systems in the game where I feel like I could actually win something while I'm recording. So I'm going to do that as well, but I thought this would be a fun little change of pace. So we have Italian folk tales selected and retold by Italo Calvino, translated by George Martin, not George R. Martin, just George Martin. Let's see, we've got several hundreds of folk tales to choose from. But I think something that would be fun to do is to read the introduction, because we don't have to read all of it. If it starts to get boring, we'll move on to an actual folk tale. But I think it's cool to get an idea of Italo Calvino's writing style, to compare it when you hear how he rewrote all these folk tales. It's very different from his usual style, and you only really get that idea if you've ever read any of his work or if you read the intro here. So let's just get to it. Introduction: A Journey Through Folklore. The writing of this book was originally undertaken because of a publishing need, a collection of Italian folk tales to take its rightful place alongside the great anthologies of foreign folklore. The problem was which text to choose. Was there an Italian equivalent of the Brothers Grimm? It is generally accepted that Italian tales from the oral tradition were recorded in literary works long before those from any other country. In Venice, as early as the middle of the 16th century, tales of wizardry and enchantment, some of them in dialect, as well as realistic novellas written in a Boccaccio-like style, were collected by Straparola in his... I'm not going to try to say the Italian name. I'm sorry, guys. These tales imparted to this book a flavor of magic, part Gothic, part Oriental, suggestive of Carpaccio. In Naples, in the 17th century, Giambattista Basile wrote fairy tales in a Neapolitan dialect and in Baroque style, and gave us the Pentameron, or entertainment for the little ones, which in our century was translated into Italian by no less a personage than the philosopher Benedetto Croce. I'm probably butchering a lot of these Italian names, I just want to let you know, but that's okay. That's not really the main point here. Anyway, continuing on. Basile's work resembles the dream of an old Mediterranean Shakespeare, obsessed with the horrible, for whom there were never enough ogres or witches, in whose far-fetched and grotesque metaphors the sublime was intermingled with the coarse and the sordid. And in the 18th century, again in Venice, to countervail Goldoni's middle-class comedies, Carlo Gozzi, a surly conservative, deeming that the public deserved no better, brought to the stage folk tales in which he mingled fairies and wizards with the harlequins and pantaloons of the Commedia dell'arte. But it was no longer a novelty. Ever since the 17th century in France, fairy tales had flourished in Versailles at the court of the Sun King, where Charles Perrault created a genre and sat down in writing a refined version of simple, popular tales which up to then had been transmitted by word of mouth. The genre became fashionable and lost its artlessness. Noble ladies and precieuses took to transcribing and inventing fairy stories, thus dressed up and embellished. In the 41 volumes in the Cabinet des Filles, the folktale waxed and waned in French literature, along with the taste for the elegant fantasy, counterbalanced by formal Cartesian rationalism. Thanks to the Brothers Grimm, it flourished again, somber and earthy, at the beginning of the 19th century in German Romantic literature. This time as the anonymous creation of the Volksgeist, which had its roots in a timeless medieval period. A patriotic cult for the poetry of the common people spread among the literateurs of Europe. Tommasio and other scholars sought out Italian popular poetry, but the tales waited in vain for an Italian romantic to discover them. Through the diligent efforts of the folklorists of the positivistic generation, people began to write down tales told by old women. These folklorists looked upon India, as did Max Muller, as the source of all stories and myths, if not of mankind itself. The solar religions impressed them as being so complex that they had to reinvent Cinderella to account for the dawn and Snow White for the spring. But meantime, after the example first set by the Germans, Widter and Wolf in Venice, Hermann Nust in Leghorn, the Austrian Schneller in Trentino, and Laura Gonzenbach in Sicily, people began collecting Noveline, Angelino de Gubernatis in Siena, Vittorio Imbriani in Florence, in Campania in Lombardy, Domenico Comparetti in Pisa, Giuseppe Petri in Sicily. Some made do with a rough summary, but others, more painstaking, succeeded in preserving and transmitting the pristine freshness of the original stories. This passion communicated itself to a host of local researchers, collectors of dialectal oddities and minutiae, to a host of local researchers. Let me reread that. This passion communicated itself to a host of local researchers, collectors of dialectal oddities and minutiae, who became the contributors to the journals of folklorist archives. In this manner, huge numbers of popular tales were transmitted by word of mouth in various dialects, especially during the last third of the 19th century. The unremitting efforts of these demo-psychologists, as Petrie labeled them, were never properly acknowledged, and the patrimony they had brought to light was destined to remain locked up in specialized libraries. The material never circulated among the public. An Italian Grimm did not emerge, although as early as 1875, Comparetti had attempted to put together a general anthology from a number of regions, publishing in the series Poems and Tales of the Italian People, which he and d'Ancona edited one volume of popular Italian tales with the promise of 2 additional volumes, which, however, never materialized. The folktale is a genre confined to scholarly interests in learned monographs, never had the romantic vogue among Italian writers and poets that it had enjoyed in the rest of Europe from Tieck to Pushkin. It it was taken over instead by writers of children's books, the master of them all being Carlo Collodi, who, some years before writing Pinocchio, had translated from the French a number of 17th century fairy tales. From time to time, some famous writers, such as Luigi Capuana, that's a difficult name to say. Doesn't look difficult on the page, but it's very difficult to say. The major novelist of the Sicilian naturalist school would do as a book for children a collection of tales having its roots both in fantasy and popular sentiment. But there was no readable master collection of Italian folk tales which would be popular in every sense of the word. Could such a book be assembled now? It was decided that I should do it. I'm not going to read the entire introduction here. I will flip to the end here. We're almost at the end. Okay. And I will read you the last page of the introduction, which I think is pretty good. And I like it, so I want to read it. In contrast to this world of kings is that of the peasants, the realistic foundation of many folk tales, the point of departure spurred by dire need, hunger, or unemployment, is typical of a large number of Italian popular narratives. I've already noted as a prime motif of numerous and particular southern folk tales, that of the cabbage picker. The cupboard is bare, so father or mother, along with daughters, scour the countryside for plants with which to make soup. Pulling up a cabbage larger than the others, they come upon a passage into an underground world where a supernatural husband waits. Or there may be a witch who will hold the girl prisoner, or a Bluebeard who feeds upon human flesh, or else, especially in seaside localities, in place of the farmer who has neither land nor work, there is a hapless fisherman who one day nets a big talking fish. But the realistic state of destruction is not merely a starting point for the folktale, a sort of springboard into wonderland, a foil for the regal and the supernatural. There are folk tales that deal with peasants from start to finish, with an agricultural laborer as hero, whose magic powers are merely complements to natural human strength and persistence. These folk tales appear like fragments of an epic of laborers that never took shape, and which on occasion borrows its themes from episodes of chivalry, replacing deeds and tournaments to win princesses with mounds of earth to be moved by plow or spade. Examples of these are the remarkable Sicilian tale Out in the World and the Abruzzi Joseph Ciofolo, Tiller Flutist, or the North Wind's Gift from Tuscany and 14 from La Marche. And on the subject of women's work and tribulations, Misfortune and the Two Cousins, both Sicilian. Those who know how rare it is in popular and non-popular poetry to fashion a dream without resorting to escapism will appreciate these instances of a self-awareness that does not deny the invention of a destiny or the force of reality which bursts forth into fantasy. Folklore could teach us no better lesson, poetic or moral. This was all translated by Catherine Hill, and obviously it was written by Italo Calvino himself. There's a lot more to that section of the book, some interesting stuff in there, but I just wanted you to get the gist of how the man wrote before I got into the folk tales, which I will do now. And the first one I want to read here is the first one in the book, called Dauntless Little John. There was once a lad whom everyone called Dauntless Little John, since he was afraid of nothing. Traveling about the world, he came to an inn, where he asked for lodgings. "We have no room here," said the innkeeper, "but if you are not afraid, I will direct you to a certain place where you can stay." "Why should I be afraid?" "People shudder at the thought of that place, since nobody who's gone in has come out alive. In the morning, the friars go up with the beer for anyone brave enough to spend the night inside." So what did Little John do but pick up a lamp, a bottle, and a sausage? and marched straight to the palace. At midnight, he was sitting at the table eating when he heard a voice in the chimney. "Shall I throw it down?" "Go ahead," replied Little John. Down the chimney into the fireplace fell a man's leg. Little John drank a glass of wine. Then the voice spoke again. "Shall I throw it down?" "Go ahead." So another leg dropped into the fireplace. Little John bit into the sausage. "Shall I throw it down?" "Go ahead." So down came an arm. Little John began whistling a tune. "Shall I throw it down?" "By all means." And there was another arm. "Shall I throw it down?" "Yes." Then came the trunk of a body, and the arms and legs stuck onto it, and there stood a man without a head. "Shall I throw it down?" "Throw it down." Down came the head and sprang into place atop the trunk. He was truly a giant, and Little John raised his glass and said, "To your health." The giant said, "Take the lamp and come with me." Little John picked up the lamp, but didn't budge. "You go first," said the giant. "No, after you," insisted Little John. "After you," thundered the giant. "You lead the way," yelled Little John. So the giant went first, with Little John behind him lighting the way. And they went through room after room until they had walked the whole length of the palace. Beneath one of the staircases was a small door. "Open it," ordered the giant. "You open it," replied Little John. So the giant shoved it open with his shoulder. There was a spiral staircase. "Go on down," directed the giant. "After you," answered Little John. They went down the steps into a cellar, and the giant pointed to a stone slab on the ground. "Raise that." "You raise it," replied Little John, and the giant lifted it as though it were a mere pebble. Beneath the slab were 3 pots of gold. "Carry those upstairs," ordered the giant. "You carry them up," answered Little John, and the giant carried them up one by one. When they were back in the hall, where the great fireplace was, the giant said, "Little John, the spell has been broken." At that, one of his legs came off and kicked its way up the chimney. "One of these pots of gold is for you." An arm came loose and climbed up the chimney. "The second pot of gold is for the friars who come to carry away your body, believing you perished." The other arm came off and followed the first. "The third pot of gold is for the first poor man who comes by." Then the other leg dropped off, leaving the giant seated on the floor. "Keep the palace for yourself." The trunk separated from the head and vanished. The owners of the palace and their children are now gone forever. At that, the head disappeared up the chimney. As soon as it was light, a dirge arose. I'm not going to read that because it's in Italian. The friars had come in. It's essentially the friars are coming in to the palace to collect Little John's body, and they're singing a song or saying a prayer, singing a hymn perhaps. The friars had come with the bier to carry off Little John's body, but there he stood at the window smoking his pipe. Dauntless Little John was a wealthy youth indeed, with all those gold pieces, and he lived happily in his palace. Then one day, what should he do but look behind him and see a shadow? He was so frightened, he died. And that is the story of Dauntless Little John. So I was thinking that maybe I could read, I don't know, maybe let's do 3 at a time. I think that's a good number. So we'll do 2 more. I think they're all pretty short like that, so I'm comfortable doing that. Excuse me. This one is called The Man Wreathed in Seaweed. The king had his crier announce in the town squares that whoever found his missing daughter would be rewarded with a fortune. But the announcement brought no results, since no one had any idea of the girl's whereabouts. She had been kidnapped one night, and they had already looked the world over for her. A sea captain suddenly had the thought that since she wasn't on land, she might well be on the sea. So he got a ship ready to go out in search of her. But when the time came to sign up the crew, not one sailor stepped forward, since no one wanted to go on a dangerous expedition that would last no telling how long. The captain waited on the pier, but fearful of being the first to embark, no one approached his ship. Also on the pier was Samfire Starboard, a reputed tramp and tippler whom no ship captain was ever willing to sign on. "Listen," said our captain, how would you like to sail with me?" "I'd like to very much." "Come aboard then." So Samfire Starboard was the first to embark. After that, other sailors took heart and boarded the ship. Once he was on the ship, Samfire Starboard did nothing but stand around all day long with his hands in his pockets and dream about the taverns he had left behind. The other sailors cursed him because there was no knowing when the voyage would end. Provisions were scarce, and he did nothing to earn his keep. The captain decided to get rid of him. "See that little island?" he asked, pointing to an isolated reef in the middle of the sea. "Get into a rowboat and go explore it. We'll be cruising right around here." Samfire Starboard stepped into the rowboat, and the ship sailed away at full speed, leaving him stranded in the middle of the sea. He approached the reef, spied a cave, and went in. Tied up inside was a very beautiful maiden, who was none other than the king's daughter. "How did you manage to find me?" she asked. "I was fishing for octopi," explained Samfire. "I was kidnapped by a huge octopus, whose prisoner I now am," said the king's daughter. "Flee before it returns, but note that for 3 hours a day it changes into a red mullet and can be caught. But you have to kill the mullet at once, or it will change into a seagull and fly away." Samfire Starboard hid his boat and waited out of sight on the reef. From the sea emerged the octopus, which was so large that it could reach clear around the island with its tentacles. All its suckers shook, having smelled a man on the reef, but the hour arrived when it had to change into a fish, and suddenly it became a red mullet and disappeared into the sea. Samfire Starboard lowered fishing nets and pulled them back up, full of gurnard, sturgeon, and dentex. The last haul produced the red mullet, shaking like a leaf. Samfire raised his oar to kill it, but instead of the red mullet, he struck the seagull flying out of the net and broke its wing. The gull then changed back into an octopus, whose wounded tentacles spurted dark red blood. Samfire was upon it instantly and beat it to death with the oar. The king's daughter gave him a diamond ring as a token of the gratitude she would always feel toward him. "Come and I'll take you to your father," he said, showing her into his boat. But the boat was tiny, and they were out in the middle of the sea. After rowing and rowing, they spied a ship in the distance. Samfire signaled to it with an oar draped with the king's daughter's gown. The ship spotted them and took them aboard. It was the same ship that had earlier discharged and abandoned Samfire. Seeing him back with the king's daughter, the captain said, "Poor Samfire Starboard. Here we thought you were lost, and now, after looking all over for you, we see you return with the king's daughter. That calls for a real celebration." To Samfire Starboard, who'd not touched a drop of wine for months on end, that seemed too good to be true. They were almost inside of their home port when the captain led Samfire to a table and placed several bottles of wine before him. Samfire drank and drank until he fell unconscious to the floor. Then the captain said to the king's daughter, "Don't dare tell your father that drunkard freed you. Tell him I freed you myself, since I'm the captain of the ship, and ordered him to rescue you." The king's daughter neither agreed nor disagreed. "I know what I'll tell him," she answered. To be on the safe side, the captain decided to do away with Samfire once and for all. Let me restart. To be on the safe side, the captain decided to do away with Samfire Starboard once and for all. That night they picked him up, still as drunk as could be, and threw him into the sea. At dawn the ship was in sight of port. With flags they signaled they were bringing home the king's daughter safe and sound. A band played on the pier, where the king waited with the entire court. A date was chosen for the king's daughter to wed the captain. On the day of the wedding, the mariners in port saw a man emerge from the water. He was covered from head to foot with seaweed, and out of his pockets and the holes in his clothes swam fish and shrimps. It was none other than Samphire Starboard. He climbed out of the water and went ambling through the city streets, with seaweed draping his head and body, and dragging along behind him. At that very moment, the wedding procession was moving through the street and came face to face with the man wreathed in seaweed. Everyone stopped. "Who is this?" asked the king. "Seize him." The guards came up, but Samphire Starboard raised a hand and the diamond on his finger sparkled in the sunlight. "My daughter's ring!" exclaimed the king. "Yes," said the daughter. "This man was my rescuer and will be my bridegroom." Samphire Starboard told his story, and the captain was imprisoned. Green though he was with seaweed, Samphire took his place beside the bride clad in white and was joined to her in matrimony. Well, if that doesn't tell you something about morality, I don't know what will. I mean, this poor Samphire Starboard got screwed on several occasions, but he didn't let that stop him. And somehow, against all logic and reason, he survived many attempts at his life. Look at me, I'm sitting here summarizing the story I just read to you, but my point is, it seems that karma has a way of coming back around on people. So maybe, just maybe, you should treat people with respect and dignity, even if you aren't quite sure that they have a use yet. People aren't important because they're useful. People are important because they're people. And we should treat everybody as if they're important. Look at me moralizing. I swear to God, these moral folk tales are doing a number on me. So let me continue before I can further embarrass myself. This one's kind of long. Let me see here. I'll tell you what, I'm going to skip that one, but I am going to read another one. This one's a bit shorter. And we will see how we're feeling after this one. We may read another. The goal here, I think, it would be really cool if I could read this entire book. I don't know if that's legal, actually, because I don't know if this is in the public domain. So I need to look into that before, but I'm also not sure because I'm pretty sure these folk tales are free and open to the public. Just maybe not necessarily this translation of the book, but I'll look into it. Maybe this can be like a long-term project, kind of like Slay the Spire, where I just, read a few of these every night or every few nights or whatever. But anyway, let's continue with the next story, which is called The Man Who Came Out Only at Night. Long ago, there lived a poor fisherman with 3 marriageable daughters. A certain young man asked for the hand of one of them, but people were wary of him, since he came out only at night. The oldest daughter said, then the middle daughter said, The oldest daughter and then the middle daughter both said no to him, but the third girl said yes. The wedding was celebrated at night, and as soon as the couple was alone, the bridegroom announced to his bride, I must tell you a secret. I am under an evil spell and doomed to be a tortoise by day and a man at night. There's only one way to break the spell. I must leave my wife right after the wedding and travel around the world, at night as a man and by day as a tortoise. If I come back and find that my wife has remained loyal to me all along and endured every hardship for my sake, I'll become a man again for good. I am willing, said the bride. The bridegroom slipped a diamond ring on her finger. Oh, another diamond finger. I'm sensing a motif in some of these, at least 2 of these stories. The bridegroom slipped a diamond ring on her finger. If you use it to a good end, this ring will help you in whatever situation you find yourself. A little bit of Lord of the Rings here. Day had dawned, and the bridegroom turned into a tortoise and crawled off to begin his journey around the world. The bride went about the city in search of work. Along the way, she came across a child crying and said to his mother, "Let me hold him in my arms and calm him." "You'd be the first person to do that," answered the mother. "He's been crying all day long." "By the power of the diamond," whispered the bride, "may the child laugh and dance and frolic." At that, the child started laughing, dancing, and frolicking. Next, the bride entered a bakery and said to the woman who owned it, "You'll have no regrets if you hire me to work for you." The owner hired her, and she began making bread, saying under her breath, "By the power of the diamond, let the whole town buy bread at this bakery as long as I work here." From then on, people poured in and out with no sign of a let-up. Among the customers were 3 young men who saw the bride and fell in love with her. "If you let me spend a night with you," one of them said to her, "I'll give you 1,000 francs. "I'll give you 2,000, said another. "And I'll make it 3,000, said the third. Wow, these guys, man. The audacity. She collected the 3,000 francs from the third man and smuggled him into the bakery that very night. "I'll be with you in a minute," she told him, "after I've put the yeast into the flour. While you're waiting, would you please knead the dough a little bit for me?" The man began kneading, and kneaded and kneaded and kneaded. By the power of the diamond, he couldn't for the life of him take his hands out of the dough, and therefore went on kneading till daylight. "So you finally finished," she said to him. "You really took your time." And she sent him packing. There's always a silly solution, but, always a silly solution to these problems in these folk tales. I wish real life worked that way, where you could just come up with a magical, whimsical solution to, things like, taxes or, general malaise and depression about the world. But let me continue. Then she said yes to the man with the 2,000 francs, brought him in as soon as it grew dark, and told him to blow on the fire a moment so that it wouldn't go out. He blew and blew and blew. By the power of the diamond, he had to keep right on blowing up to the next morning with his face bulging like a wineskin. "What a way to behave," she said to him in the morning. "You come to see me, but spend the night blowing on the fire." And she sent him packing. The next night she brought in the man with 1,000 francs. "I have to add the yeast," she told him. "While I'm doing that, go shut the door." The man shut the door, which by the power of the diamond came open again right away. All night long he closed it, only to see it immediately reopen, and in no time the sun was up. "Did you finally close the door? Well, you may now open it again and get out." Seething with rage, the 3 men denounced her to the authorities. In that day and times there were, in addition to policemen, women officers who were called whenever a woman has to be brought into custody. Let me reread that. That was oddly written. Seething with rage, the 3 men denounced her to the authorities. In that day and time, there were, in addition to policemen, okay, now I understand, women officers who were called whenever a woman was to be brought into custody. So 4 women officers went to apprehend the bride. "By the power of the diamond," said the bride, "let these women box one another's ears until tomorrow morning." The 4 women officers began boxing one another's ears so hard that their heads swelled up like pumpkins, and they still went on striking each other for all they were worth. When the women officers failed to return with the culprit, 4 male officers were sent out to look for them. The bride saw them coming and said, "By the power of the diamond, let those men play leapfrog." One of the male officers dropped down at once on all fours. A second one moved up, put his hands on the officer's back, and leaped over him, with the third and fourth following in his tracks. Thus began a game of leapfrog. Right at that point, a tortoise came crawling into view. It was the husband returning from his trip around the world. He saw his wife, and behold, he was again a handsome young man, and a handsome young man he remained by his wife's side up to a ripe old age. Well, I don't know about you guys, but I quite enjoyed the bride in that story. I like her moxie. I like her quick thinking. I approve. Very good story. Let's do another one. Why not? I think we can do one more. Let me see. Okay. I think this will be a good one. Now, I should note, I have read some of these in the past, back when I knew when I first got this book, but I'm telling you guys, it's a very, very large book. So, I haven't read all of them, for one, and for two, it's been so long that even the ones I did read, I don't remember. But anyway, let's continue. So this story is called Body Without Soul. There was a widow with a son named Jack, who at 13 wanted to leave home to seek his fortune. His mother said to him, "What do you expect to do out in the world? Don't you know you're still a little boy? When you're able to fell that pine tree behind our house with one kick, then you can go." Every day after that, as soon as he rose in the morning, Jack would get a running start and jump against the trunk of the tree with both feet, but the pine never budged an inch, and he fell flat on his back. He would get up again, shake the dirt off, and go back inside. At last, one fine morning, he jumped with all his might, and the tree gave way and toppled to the ground, his roots in the air. Jack ran and got his mother, who, surveying the felled tree, said, "You may now go wherever you wish, my son." Jack bid her farewell and set out. After walking for days and days, he came to a city whose king had a horse named Rondello that no one had ever been able to ride. People constantly tried, but were thrown just when it appeared they would succeed. Looking on, Jack soon realized that the horse was afraid of its own shadow. Call back to Dauntless Little John. Maybe Dauntless Little John didn't die, he turned into a horse. Let's see, where was I? Looking on, Jack soon realized that the horse was afraid of its own shadow, so he volunteered to break Rondello himself. He began by going up to the horse in the stable, talking to it and patting it. Then he suddenly jumped into the saddle and rode the animal outside, straight into the sun. That way it couldn't see any shadow to frighten it. Jack took a steady hold of the reins, pressed his knees to the horse, and galloped off. A quarter of an hour later, Rondello was as docile as a lamb, but let no one ride him after that but Jack. From then on, Jack served the king, who was so fond of him that the other servants grew jealous and plotted to get rid of him. Now the king had a daughter who had been kidnapped in her infancy by the sorcerer, Body Without Soul. Oh, okay, so that's where that name comes from. And no one had heard of her since. The servants went to the king, claiming Jack had boasted to everybody he would free her. The king sent for him. Jack was amazed and said this was the first he had even heard of the king's daughter. But the fact that anyone had dared make light of the episode concerning his daughter so infuriated the king that he said, "Either you free her or I'll have you beheaded." Oh no. Since there was no calming the king now, Jack asked for a rusty sword they kept hanging on the wall, saddled Rondello, and rode off. Crossing a forest, he saw a lion motioning him to stop. Although a bit uneasy, Jack disliked the idea of running away, so he dismounted and asked what the lion wanted. "Jack," said the lion, "as you can see, there are 4 of us here. Myself, a dog, an eagle, and an ant. We have a dead donkey to parcel among us. Since you have a sword, carve the animal and give us each a portion." Jack cut off the donkey's head and gave it to the ant. "Here you are. This will make you a nice home and supply you with all the food you'll ever want." Next, he cut off the hooves and gave them to the dog. Here's something to gnaw on as long as you like." He cut out the entrails and gave them to the eagle. "This is your food, which you can carry to the treetops where you perch." All the rest he gave to the lion, which as the biggest of the four deserved the largest portion. He got back on his horse and started off, only to hear his name called. "Dear me," he thought, "I must have made some mistake in dividing the parts." But the lion said to him, "You did us a big favor, and you were very fair. As one good deed deserves another, I'm giving you one of my claws, which will turn you into the fiercest lion in the world when you wear it." The dog said, "Here's one of my whiskers, which will turn you into the fastest dog on earth whenever you place it under your nose." The eagle said, "Here is a feather from my wings, which can change you into the biggest and strongest eagle in the sky." The ant said, "I'm giving you one of my tiny legs. Put it on and you will become an ant so small that no one can see you, even with a magnifying glass." Jack took his presents, thanked the four animals, and departed. As he was uncertain whether the gifts were magic or not, thinking the animals might have played a joke on him, he stopped as soon as he was out of sight to test them. He became lion, dog, eagle, and ant. Next, ant, eagle, dog, and lion. Then eagle, ant, lion, and dog. Finally, dog, lion, ant, and eagle. Yes, everything worked like a charm. All smiles, he moved onward. Beyond the forest was a lake, on whose shore stood the castle of Body Without Soul. Jack changed into an eagle and flew straight to the edge of a closed window. Then he changed into an ant and crawled into the room. It was a beautiful bedchamber, where beneath a canopy lay the king's daughter asleep. Still an ant, Jack went crawling over her cheek until she awakened. Then he removed the tiny ant leg, and the king's daughter suddenly beheld a handsome youth at her side. "Don't be afraid," he said, signaling a silence. "I've come to free you. You must get the sorcerer to tell you what could kill him." When the sorcerer returned, Jack changed back into being an ant. The king's daughter made a big to-do over Body Without Soul, seating him at her feet and drawing his head onto her lap. Then she began, "My darling sorcerer, I know you're a body without a soul, and therefore incapable of dying. But I live in constant fear of someone finding your soul and putting you to death." "I can tell you the secret," replied the sorcerer, "since you're imprisoned here and can't possibly betray me. To slay me would require a lion mighty enough to kill the black lion in the forest. Out of the belly of the dead lion would leap a black dog, so swift that only the fastest dog on earth could catch it. Out of the belly of the black dog would fly a black eagle that could withstand every eagle under the sun. But if by chance that eagle were slain, a black egg would have to be taken out of its craw and cracked over my brow for my soul to fly away and leave me dead. Does all that seem easy? Do you have any real grounds for worry?" With his tiny ant ears, Jack took in every word, then crawled back under the window to the ledge, where he again turned into an eagle and soared into the forest. There he changed into a lion and stalked the underbrush until he came face to face with the black lion. The black lion jumped him, but Jack, being the strongest lion in the world, tore it to bits. Back at the castle, the sorcerer felt his head spin. The lion's belly was slit open, and out bolted a swift-footed black dog. But Jack turned into the fastest dog on earth, caught him, and they rolled together in a ball, biting each other till the black dog lay dead. Back at the castle, the sorcerer had to take to his bed. The dog's belly was slit open, and out flew a black eagle, but Jack became the most powerful eagle under the sun, and they soared through the sky, pecking and clawing each other, until the black eagle folded its wings and fell to earth. At the castle, the sorcerer ran a high fever and curled up under the bedclothes. Jack changed back into a man, opened the eagle's craw, and removed the black egg. He returned to the castle and gave it to the king's daughter, who was overjoyed. "How on earth did you do it?" she asked. "Nothing to it," replied Jack. "The rest is now up to you." The king's daughter entered the sorcerer's bedchamber, asking, "How do you feel?" "Woe's me, I've been betrayed. I brought you a cup of broth. Drink some." The sorcerer sat up in his bed and bent over to drink the broth. "Here, let me break an egg into it and give it more body." At that, the king's daughter broke the black egg over his brow, and Body Without Soul died on the spot. Jack took the I'm going to butcher the ending of this story, huh? Jack took the king's daughter home to her father. Everyone was overjoyed, and the young couple was married forthwith. Well, I have to be honest with you. I would say my favorite story that I read so far today would have to be, let me go back, find it again. Hold on. Give me a second here. Not that one. We're almost there. Have to flip a couple of pages back. The Man Wreathed in Seaweed. I have a very specific soft spot for sea stories, so that one was my favorite, but I loved all of them. They were all interesting, and I hope you enjoyed all of them. And I hope that these stories gave you a little bit of comfort. Maybe you're already asleep by now, but maybe not. And if not, maybe they helped calm you down, gave you a little bit of joy, a little bit of wonder, a little bit of whimsy in your life. And yeah, I think we'll come back and do this again. So I want to thank you all for listening. Everybody sleep tight, and I will see you in the next video. Take care.